Welcome back. Earlier in the show, I talked about my concerns regarding proposals for a World Health Organization pandemic treaty. A total of 194 countries, including the UK, are preparing to cede national sovereignty to the unelected and unaccountable WHO on the matter of future health emergencies. Joining me now to discuss the proposal is surgeon and commentator on matters health and medicine and friend of the show, Dr Tony Hinton. Hello, Tony. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
You're a medical professional of many years' experience. How do you feel about the prospect of having decisions about how we respond to medical emergencies in this country outsourced to an unelected body sat in Geneva?
Well, I listened to your introduction earlier, and actually what I would say is that was a very good summing up, but it's actually worse than that. It's the World Health Assembly, which is the decision-making body of the World Health Organization. They meet every year around about this time in Geneva. It's the first time they've met in person for 2 years because of COVID. And this is a amendment to the international health regulations. And it's not just about pandemics. It doesn't just give the World Health Organization control over a pandemic. It allows them to call out a potential or actual health emergency. That could be all sorts of things. Potentially, of course, if the people that are very concerned about global warming and possible health effects, that could get the World Health Organization involved in those sorts of conversations. Now, what I would say is, has anybody heard Boris Johnson mention this? Or Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary? Has anyone seen it discussed in Parliament? How many people in the public have heard about this? Now, the one good thing is that even if this does get passed between the 22nd and the 28th of this month, that's not the end of the story. It doesn't come in until 2024. And in fact, even countries that supposedly support the amendment, those countries have got 6 months to withdraw their agreement and stop that going forward. Whether it has to be unanimous, I've found that very difficult to get to the bottom of. The World Health Organization is very opaque in the way that it works.
You raise many salient points there, Tony. Not least the fact that it hasn't been discussed. You know, it's not just me, is it? You feel as if while a population is on its knees with exhaustion, you know, having been through the last couple of years, major things, not slight, major things are being slipped past a population that's exhausted. Now, why would that? Why is consultation and consideration about something that's potentially affecting as this not everywhere? Why isn't this on the sides of buses?
Well, I think they're in a hurry to do this for a number of reasons, because, of course, a lot of these amendments that have gone in have come from the Biden administration. And if the next president of the United States is not of the same political persuasion, this may be very difficult to put through. So I think that's why they're in such a hurry. But just have a look at the COVID record of the World Health Organization, the things they told us. So first of all, they said this didn't spread person to person, taking China's word. Within weeks, that had changed. They said we didn't need to stop international flights. China stopped its domestic flights, but carried on its international flights. That was changed within weeks. Everywhere, they said, should lock down and follow the example of China, which Italy did, and then much of the rest of the world. They said no masks were needed for the general public, I would say quite rightly, but within months they changed that. Eventually, they said countries should only use lockdowns as a last resort. So they continually change their advice with no further medical evidence put forward. Let's just do a little thought experiment. Where would we be now if the World Health Organization had had the powers for the last 2 years that they want to take on? What would have happened in Sweden? We would not have Sweden with almost no lockdowns, a good economy, the lowest excess deaths in Europe to compare to. We wouldn't have had places like Uttar Pradesh in India that was very successful in fighting COVID with old-fashioned medicines like ivermectin, doxycycline, vitamin D, and other antibiotics. Everyone would have had to have just done exactly the same. Well, that's not good for science or medicine. The fact that we've got these countries that did things differently, we can learn from their experience and see who made the best decisions and make sure that those are the decisions we do next time.
Tony, bear with me while I bring my panel of guests in here. It's very interesting listening to Dr. Hinton there, isn't it? That idea that rather than collectivise problem solving, rather it be dispersed through individual countries who can confer and who can share information. But isn't it more likely that solutions are found by listening to as many people as possible rather than collecting all the decision-making in the hands of a few?
Well, clearly, progress in the world is made by different people doing different things. And if we've all got to do the same, how do we know that's the right answer? Nobody actually knew what the answer was to this pandemic. And it's what we've learnt through these other countries doing different things, such as Sweden, that there are alternatives. And I think that's possibly what also drove Boris Johnson to end the lockdown when he did. Because if you all do the same thing and it is catastrophic, you all die. That can't be right, can it?
Mo, I know that, and I understand to an extent that you think we needn't perhaps fear the WHO in the way that I do. I hear that and understand it. But when you listen to Dr. Hinton there, it is troubling on many levels that there's this move for sovereign states to abdicate responsibility for decision-making, possibly because it's uncomfortable, so that they can stand behind and take shelter in decisions made by others.
As a direction of travel, I'm 100% in agreement with you and with Tony. It's a direction of travel that we don't want. We want that democratic accountability. I think if you think about the reality of what happened in the pandemic, when it came to vaccines, all of a sudden we got vaccine nationalism. Even the EU didn't act as a coordinated bloc with all their treaties and all their kind of agreements to work as one unit. And you mentioned about Boris Johnson coming out of lockdown earlier. He did that for his own reasons because it was politically astute for him to do that at that time. But I don't think all the protests on the streets and the Canadian truckers and everything that happened in London, right, said Fred, I don't think that was for nothing. I think that did have an impact. So that's why I worry about the direction of travel. I think we're right to bring it up. And as Tony said, you know, this is not being discussed in a referendum, or it's not being advertised, you know, for free consultation. And when I think, was it Richard Tice tried to have a referendum on net zero in somewhere in the northwest, wasn't it? And that was shut down. So even the idea that we as a population should be able to freely debate these things is shut down. And that's the level at which I think we need to fight it. We need to fight for our right to kind of be able to discuss these things.
Keith, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, well, I've got some very close friends who have not had any vaccination at all. They refuse. They're Christians. They believe that Jesus will protect them. You can debate that if you want, but that was their choice. If we've got the WHO saying you must be inoculised, blah, 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 that's not right. That is living in a state of authoritarianism, which we don't want to be. Surely you have to be in control of your own body. You have to be allowed to make choices. And it would be dreadful if we lived in some 1984 state where we were told to breathe in and breathe out. Surely.
Tony, why on earth would you think that we would be contemplating taking instruction from the WHO, which has so celebrated the Chinese model? You know, the most draconian measures out there. Of all of all the examples to not take and not follow, I would have thought it's China's. What does that tell us about our leaders?
Remember, Dr. Tedros, who heads the World Health Organization, is not a medical doctor. He's a politician. He was the foreign minister of Ethiopia. And during that time, there were terrible wars going on in Ethiopia. And he's a very good friend of China. He was originally, I think, a member of the Communist Party. And what's being pushed via the WHO, taking advantage of this recent pandemic, which actually the emergency now should be absolutely declared over. There is no COVID emergency anymore. But this is all about heading towards a world government. It's nothing to do with just health. It's all about politics. But of course, any country that wants to, at any time, can withdraw their membership from the World Health Organization, as happened with the United States a couple of years ago. And then President Biden rejoined.
Yes, I know. I find it a deeply troubling passage of path that we are on. It's a deeply disturbing, I think, sequence of events. Thank you so much for bringing your light to it tonight, Dr. Tony Hinton. We will speak again, I'm sure, in the future. Have to move on though. After the break, it's time, or it will be, to meet this week's